Hello, fellow parents and educators. Thank you for joining me at Education Evolution, where we are disrupting the status quo in today's learning models. We talk about present-day education, what's broken, who's fixing it, and how. I'm Dr. Maureen O'Shaughnessy, your host and founder of Education Evolution and the Microschool Coalition, where we are fiercely committed to changing the narrative, to reimagining the education landscape and creating learning that serves all children and prepares them to thrive. If you are new, welcome to the podcast. Please subscribe on our website to get it delivered to your inbox weekly. If you've been around a while, have you left a review? Welcome, Jenny and Donnell. It's so good to have you both.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We're glad to be here.
Listeners, today we get to learn from Jenny O'Meara, a rural middle school principal in North Carolina, and Donnell Cannon, the high school principal for these same students. Total, they serve a little under 400 students. Together, they have transformed their learners' experience into one of identity, purpose, and passion. So impressive. Let's dive in. Jenny and Donnell, how did you two ever get started on this path of transforming your schools?
Oh man, that's just like the question, right? So I think the thing that really sparked it for us was that we could clearly experience this tension of like, we really care about kids. We really care about their futures, and we really care about serving every single kid. And like still very clearly seeing that the system as it's currently designed is just not getting the outcomes for every single kid, especially the kids that we serve. About 80% of our kids are identify as African American, about 15% identify as Latinx. And so we were really seeing like the system is not serving every single kid. There's something like, it's not okay. And we were fortunate enough to have a pretty visionary superintendent, two pretty visionary superintendents who said like, yeah, you guys are right. Like, let's try something different. Nice. And we applied for a collaborative with an organization called Transcend Education. And we got to go through this year-long journey of redesign and reimagining school with them that I think really was a spark.
Yeah. That, I think that was like certainly our like immediate spark. I think for me, and I'm sure like Jay has the same burning fuel and fire. It's like long before then. For me, I was on the receiving end of just like an education that wasn't good enough. Mm-hmm. I didn't feel prepared me for like the what I needed to thrive in and transform the world, but also didn't really like lean towards things I was passionate about, like interested in, or didn't make me like, didn't allow me to feel like I was bright, or didn't allow me to feel like I had passions and I could pursue a place of discovery. So I went on to college, like believing some of this negative like messages that whether were explicit or it wasn't so, and that didn't feel good. But as a teacher, I walked into very similar classrooms that prepared students in the exact same way. And I knew that like that in itself wasn't good enough. But as a teacher, right, I was like conscious of those things as like through my own experience. But I didn't quite have the tools to interrupt what was happening, right? So I too joined, Jenny shared this on one of our podcasts, like I too joined the hamster wheel in a way. That didn't feel good. So Jenny and I, we both graduated from NC State's like NELA program, and I think which allowed us to think about like how might we interrupt such systems like as school leaders. Mm-hmm. And so prior to that experience, and prior to like pausing for a second, thinking about like how might we as system leaders create a different pathway for kids, and we both came to Edgecombe to join like some of the iconoclastic work that was happening, led by John Farley, and I think that's kind of like what stoked us and put us on like a pathway towards like what we're up to now.
Oh, that's great, and I love how you use the verb interrupt. That's such a sharp verb, and it means now, but it's not mean or harsh. It captures me. I like your use of that. I love how you're reverse engineering and guided by the image of your graduates as 25-year-olds. I remember Jenny sharing that with me. Tell us more.
Yeah. So, Donnell mentioned our former superintendent, John Farley, and he sort of started this work, and our current superintendent, Dr. Valerie Bridges, has kind of carried it forward. But about 5 years ago, I think our district convened a group of stakeholders, so community members, church leaders, business owners, students, principals, teachers, just parents. And so the community hit with 5, kind of statements that we want to be true by the time our students are 25 years old. And as we call our community the north side of the county we serve. And so in the north side community, we kept hearing from parents that 2 of them really stuck out. And it was, by the time our graduates are 25, they will know their purpose and their passion, and they're living it out. And they will continue to be resilient in the face of challenges.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah. So I think one thing that has been really helpful about these graduate aims for us is they kind of have become almost like a lighthouse for us. Like every decision we make is in service of making sure that these 2 things are true for our learners. And so if something in one of our school designs or one of our signature learning experiences doesn't lead a student to knowing their purpose, then it's really worth questioning, why are we doing this?
Yeah. And as we were beginning our design journey and collecting our insights, it just so happened that the stars aligned and our insights also pointed to these 2 graduate aims. So essentially our parents and our students said they wanted the same thing, right? They wanted us to really lean in hard to these graduate aims. And so yeah, as Jenny said, that certainly have been our lighthouse and kind of have ushered us on this design path in a way.
So how do you address resilience, SEL, and identity in meaningful ways in your schools to bring these ideals into the school?
Yeah, so there are a few ways in which we're living these components out. So one, we know that through cognitive science, like our kids, the science of learning and development, that our kids' identities are incredibly important, and when inextricably linked to motivation, lived experiences, life context, and cognition, some amazing things can happen for kids.
You know what? I feel like that needs to be unpacked even more. Like that one sentence was just like a whole podcast in itself. Can you break that down just a little more?
Yeah. So the way learning works, right? If there's going to be increased sensory stimuli transfer from the working memory to long-term memory, we know those components have to be in partnership, right? So a kid's identity, they have to have a space and time to think about their identities, because if not, then it overloads their working memory, right? Because students will deliberately spend time or not spend time thinking about those things. So if we don't create space and time for students to think about their identities and how they're changing and how they're developing over time, and give them time to commit to new identities and explore it, then relinquish it, then the students would do that, right? Regardless, they would take up the working, it would take up the overload the working memory, and there's no new sensory stimuli to be able to put into the working memory to be transferred in the first place. So there has to be time for students to actually sit with that, and time for them to process that in the school day, so that more information and new sensory stimuli can be transferred into long-term memory.
And I got to say real quickly, Donnell is the MVP when it comes to understanding the science of learning and development. So for the listeners who are like, wait, I want to learn more about this, there's this incredible resource that we just study over and over and over again. And it's called the Designing for Learning Primer. It's from Transcend Education. So if folks just look that up, it's this incredible document that takes everything Donnell is saying and ties it together. And we just make sure to audit all of our learning experiences against the science of learning and development to make sure that we are addressing these principles that we know have to be true for learning to take place.
I'll make sure to put that in the show notes so people have a link to it. Thank you. Yeah, I was like, whoa, this is a college class all of a sudden. This is amazing.
Yeah, Donnell could definitely teach a whole semester of this.
This is all that we've learned from our friends at Transcend. So huge shout out to Transcend and the work that they're doing and the research that they're out front leading. It has definitely transformed the way that I see learning and think about how it happens in our school. And yeah, so you're going to put in the show notes. So folks, please check that out. Please live in the science. If you're trying to celebrate some bold things for kids, I think that's first where it happens. But just to lead a little bit deeper into identity, because we know that's important, right? Because we know that there's no trade-off. It's not like I do this and this thing. We know that these things work hand in hand. Then we also have to create space for our babies to really think about what are the intersections of their identity how are they formed, when are they formed, and give them space to commit to new ones if we truly want learning to come alive. So a few ways in which like we try our best to do that. One, we have the approach where we're like trying to tackle like institutional racism, and in ways in which like we help kids like deeply understand like racism, how it shows up, when it shows up, how like what are the tools that you can use to disrupt it. But then also we try to have like these micro and macro affirmations in our school day around our building. So like it seeps into our kids like schematas, and they're telling like new stories of like who they are in this world, consider themselves as powerful, consider themselves as fully human, and deeply understand that. So like whatever negative, stereotypes or other messaging they get from society, like those students are prepared and have like a buffer to kind of reject those things. So we spend time in soft ways, right? Like, so like redesigning our spaces. Jenny over at Phillips, they're doing an amazing job ensuring that their spaces, like when kids walk in, if nothing else, is like, people love me here, so the culture is like palpable, and it's students really feel like, and you'll hear Jay talk about this often, but a really sense of love and belonging. They really lean into that over at our family at Phillips. But I know North and like too, we try our best to like wherever kids walk, like there is in like these images across our building, these like murals, right? They help kids like feel powerful again and remind them like who they are. So for an example, we are the Warriors. We ran a sprint a few years back to smear ourselves of like the native caricature, and our kids had to learn about what that means, how that causes harm, when do we push people into the margins, how do we disrupt it. And together collectively we decided that like we were going to replace those native caricatures because we're not gatekeepers of injustice, right? We want something different. So we decided to replace those with murals that represented our kids and so we have like a young Black girl silhouette in the front when you first walk in with a Nikki Giovanni poem. And that's like, so kids get to fill into that. And we got a Rosa Greta concrete painting in the cafeteria. So that's one way, right? Like to focus on like how, like, what are the at-bats that our students get to like fill into like their own power and to fill into their own beauty and their culture and what they offer. But then we also have a Roses in Concrete curriculum, which we really try to lean into to help our students deeply or provide them the space to deeply think about, understand themselves, understand their historical selves, and like all that has like formed like the person they are today. But then on the other arm of that curriculum, it's also helping kids to really understand systems of oppression, understanding power and how that works, and like young people can do to create a better world through our curriculum. Jay, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I think I'll just add so the Roses in Concrete curriculum has actually been just a really interesting journey, I think. So, 3 years ago when we launched a micro school to pilot, this new way of doing school for us, that was a big, like one of our bigger pushes. So, like every Wednesday for 2 hours was Roses in Concrete time. And it's really evolved over the years now. And so what we have now is a morning meeting time, which I think a lot of schools are starting to do. And if schools out there are not doing it, I just think like, we know that kids cannot learn until they feel loved and safe. So like, let's build that time into the day and then they can be ready to learn. And so, we built this time in because I think really the schedule is one of the key levers that any school has in showing what you value, right? And then in making it true for kids. And so we leverage our morning meeting time now for our Roses in Concrete curriculum. So it's kind of become this time for cultivating a sense of belonging, cultivating a sense of safety, taking space to really think about who am I? How do I show up in this world? And then also just like building trust and community. And just by having this time in the morning, just like here's how it's like transformed just Phillips, for example. We use a survey called the Panorama Education Survey, and it actually asks kids these questions and then it gives you a measurement for your percent of students who feel a sense of safety and your percent of students who feel a sense of belonging. And since we started this morning meeting time, which we call Banner at Phillips, we increased by like 16 points on one and 17 points on another, which like at first I was like, that's not that much. And then I looked at it, and when I compared it to schools, other middle schools similar to ours, we were like in the 99th percentile for safety and belonging. And so, I think there's something there when you carve the time out and then you support teachers. And a piece of this too, to like unlayer a little even bit more, is during our professional development, our teachers are exploring their own identities too. Like literally, we have them do the activities in our PD sessions before they then take them and do them with students. And so we're not going to have you facilitate a conversation about an identity map with your kids until you've done one for yourself and really reflected on it for you. So I think it's been really interesting watching this like parallel growth for our students and staff, especially this year during such a difficult time for everybody, you know?
That is so cool. And for your teachers to have that integrity of walking the talk and to really be embodying it themselves, I'm sure that the kids can notice that integrity and that increases their willingness to buy in.
Yeah. And it's beautiful when you like see a teacher. I mean, I like was observing that day and I saw a teacher hold up her identity map to the kids. I also held up mine because I made one too. And so we were able to show them these are how I see myself. And some of the kids were like, what? And like, it was just really beautiful. And then they felt comfortable sharing theirs. And there's something there about doing it together and exploring it together.
Yeah, it reminds us we're all humans. It's not necessarily this hierarchy, and it connects us. And I think that when we're focused just on content, the kids aren't engaged and it's not happening. So your investment is making it so kids are ready to learn. And it seems like that should be a given at all schools. And it's exciting that you're modeling that so strongly.
Thank you. And to Donnell's point, I think what's really, really fun about it and going back to those graduate aims is it's like we are kind of reverse engineering it, right? So like in middle grades, it's more like, who am I? What do I care about? But in high school now, it's like, what injustices in the world am I going to do something about? And that makes me so excited about like cultivating this like 6-12. And we're going to be we're currently pulling in our partner elementary school, and like a K-12 alignment to achieve these graduate aims is like the dream.
Oh my gosh. And this is public school. This is like a 13-year process you're going to be creating. You're definitely transforming lives. I'm wondering, how did you I know you had some great leadership, but how did you get district and parent support, to break that funnel where you dump all the kids in and they all have to come out the other end? How did you get everybody to pull together and let this happen?
Jenny had absolutely extraordinary relationships with kids and families at Phillips Middle School.
Okay.
Wow, really?
You think about right? Like Jenny was able to make a big ask and families trusted Jenny to just kind of allow us to spend a year like being safely dangerous, right? And like really trying a bunch of things out.
So Donnell, you're talking about when I recruited kids to join the micro school.
Yeah. So
Okay.
Yeah. So the families trusted her, right, to take that big jump. So families said, I'll go join the micro school on the strength of that. Miss O'Meara loves my kids, right? That's and honest, because kids, like when we started the micro school year, we made the ask. We started with rising 9th graders and rising 8th graders, and they hadn't known me as a leader. And if Jenny hadn't and her family over at Phillips hadn't allowed those families to feel the sense of love and belonging and the sense of trust, right? Then they wouldn't have allowed those families their children to allow us to do things that are safely dangerous, to try a bunch of things out, to like ideate in big ways and then leave things in like perpetual beta. But
I gotta add something there though, because I think you're right. The trust was a piece of it, but also the micro school was designed based on empathy interviews we've been conducting with families in our community and insights we gained from them. And so basically, like all I did, like I really appreciate those affirmations big time, but all I did was put a model in front of people that they'd been asking for and say, do you want to be a part of this? Like, do you want your child to have time to explore their identity? And it's like, yes, because that's what I've been telling you this whole time. Do you want your child to see content come to life and see how math and ELA and social studies and science all connect? Well, yes, that's what I've been like. Parents were like, yeah, of course, this is what I want for my kids. And so, I mean, all we did was listen to them and then put back in front of them what they've been asking for.
Yeah. And I think the other part of my response is that I think like school, like to Jenny's point, right? Like school in the traditional sense hadn't been working for their kid, right? And we saw that like pushing through through our empathy interviews and the insights from that. But So it's kind of like, what do you have to lose, right? It's like, you're already in a school model where like school actually isn't working. We can try some things and it could actually work, or it might not, but it wouldn't be too far different from what's already happening. Like, and not like in a, just like from an institutional sense, right? Just like I go to class, I have lunch at this time, I go to my math class, like, and students don't get the thrill of like, what am I interested in? How do I connect it to what's happening in my life? Like, how do I like learn about the things I'm like my own passions, like opportunities and at bats to do that? So it's kind of like, look, here's what you're saying. We're going to try this thing. It might not work, but I mean, it's not working already. So yeah.
Yeah, I think like the other piece I'll add to that, like I think Donnell just nailed it right there. Is like people are like, yeah, it's already not working. Is we also spent a lot of time presenting this model to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. I mean, we were like showing it to our colleagues, we were showing it to families, to our board members, our superintendent was already in there with us. And then we gave people the space too to like poke holes in it. And sometimes I think when you open up that space, then people are like, I'm a part of that now. And so I'm invested in that now. So I think like that was really important. And then the year we implemented the microschool itself, we had a lot of small early wins. I mean, we took a group of kids to present at a statewide, I'm not even quite sure what it was called, a bridge. It was a statewide convening of education leaders. And 4 of our students came and spoke at it and like nailed it. And then we had a partnership with Education NC. Yeah, they were amazing. We had a partnership with Ed NC, a local organization in North Carolina that does a lot to really tell the stories of education and schools here. And they really helped us tell our story too. So learning to tell our story was really, really important, I think. The other piece that I got to name though is there were times though where we wanted to do wild and crazy things and parents weren't ready for it. And we had to say, okay, that's okay. So like one example would be, we want to, frankly, I would like to abolish the grading system one day. And we had a lot of parents who said, I want my baby to go to college. Right now, as far as I know, colleges are still looking at GPAs. The GPA matters to me. And we had to honor and respect that. So there was some give and take there.
That's important. It sounds like you listened a lot and people felt like they could be heard and they had input. So then they had buy-in, and that communal effort is a big part of your success.
Yeah. And I think, a huge part of that, right, was like our willingness to strategically abandon things, right? Like, I think, leaving things in perpetual beta in that way and like showing up in that spirit, right? Like everything is still like up for design. Everything's a prototype. It kind of allows us to like take our time with it, right? It didn't work. Okay. Like let's pick up pieces. Let's rediscover. Let's try it again. But we were able to say like, okay, cool. The trade-off is like, we're going to try this thing and we'll wait to tackle grading, right? We're going to try like this thing, identity. And we're going to advocate for, like dosing down the testing on kids later, right? Like it was just like, like what are the trade-offs that we're willing to make, and like entering it with like a level of like strategic abandonment was really helpful.
Yeah, well said.
Now, and it sounds like you're modeling design thinking as you go iteration by iteration. I know one of my students this fall was like, you guys were going to be in person outdoors full days. Now you're going to half days because it's too noisy. And now you're going to 1 day a week with half the kids instead of half days. And so they get to see us adapting and constantly taking in new information and adjusting. And they said, this is what you make us do all the time with design thinking. So we're glad that you have to keep doing other iterations too. So I think that it has a lot of authenticity to, like you said, perpetual beta. It's like, yeah, that's the real world.
Yes, that is so real.
Yeah, we too, we're fans of the design thinking process. So we use it as a tool. We embody it as like a spirit, and our kids as well. So they have like the muscle to use it as a tool to, bring about the world they want to live in.
Yeah, my teachers actually have a joke about how often we change the schedule. So when we go to hire somebody, if someone's inflexible, they're like, nope, they won't be able to handle how much we make adjustments and changes for kids. And it's like, all right, then.
Yep. That's gotta be on that checklist. I hear you. So a final question for each of you. I always end with this magic wand. So if you each had a magic wand and get to transform schools, what would you wish? You can do anything. Where do we start?
Do you want to go for it?
Got it.
It's a really big question. If I had a magic I'm going to say all the things. I wouldn't I would do everything at once. But I think if I could transform the system, I would. The few things gosh, I'm back at that. But I think there are a few things that I might consider. Like one, I think I would create spaces for like students to be in positions to always inform the things, and not like at a very like local level or like in schools. Like my kids need to be at the in a seat at the General Assembly, right? Like my babies need to be like a board seat. Like every board should have a student like represented on their boards, right? Like giving kids big power and not like how should we change the lunch bell schedule? But like really like pandemic happens. Hey, what should we do with grading, kiddos? Right? Like they need to be right there. So creating spaces to like for students to really be heard and really consider, because they do have like answers and ideas, and we should just ask. I guess the last thing would be I'm really interested in like perhaps strategically abandoning the traditional system, the industrial system. So, and I want to ensure that it's like fundamentally like different, and we reconsider what is the purpose of education more widely in this country. And it has to be one that's centered on like equity, liberation, and like human flourishing. And what that would look like is like maybe not in a brick and mortar school.
Yeah.
That was a cool school in Denver that we kind of studied up on, and the kids are like running a bike shop, and school happens there, and all the learning's like integrated through that experience. So really, like right now, I'm really excited, and thing that's fanning my fire is I'm getting to a time where we can abandon like, you know, the ideals that we've held around like what school should be like in a traditional sense, and moving more towards like ideas that may not have been discovered, and really consider those as like the new way of doing school. So yeah, Jay, I'm really excited to hear what you guys say.
I don't know. I feel like we can do a mic drop and end it right there. But I think, yeah, when you ask that question, the thing that just comes to mind for me is just like community and kid-centered schools. Like I know I'm simplifying it like a ton, but I just think if we let parents and teachers be the geniuses they are and design the schools that they want for their communities and their kids, then like kids are going to be okay, because no parent is going to lower the bar for their own child. Like that's just not going to happen. And I think the more we have all these standardized whatever, everything, the more we're actually harming communities and not honoring the genius that parents and communities bring to
our Jenny
world. I know. I really believe that with everything in my heart, because literally every part of our design has been listening to our community and then pairing it with the science of development and learning. So, I mean, of course, like that's where the role teachers play. Like they are the experts in understanding the science of learning, but then parents are the experts in their children and their communities and what they want to be true. And so I just think, you know, I guess I dream of just like a ton of flexibility and like let communities decide what they want to be true for their children. And maybe I'm too hopeful here. we have houses at Phillips Middle School. I'm in the house of hope, so I can't help myself. But I really genuinely believe that families and communities will raise the bar higher than we ever even dreamed if we were to try such a thing.
Mic drop.
Completely agree. Totally. Mic drop for both of you. Wow. Jenny, Donnell, thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us. It's been great. Yeah.
Jenny and Donnell gave us a lot to think about, didn't they? I can't wait to learn more about how Transcend, which is in the show notes, guides the redesign of education. The graduate aims for students by age 25 to know their purpose and passion and be living it out, and for them to be continuously resilient in the face of challenges. Can you hear how different that is from students passing standardized state tests and 4 years of English? I get shivers thinking about schools that look at the real outcomes we want for our youth. Donnell nailed it.
What do we have to lose? Educational institutions are already not working. Redesigning learning and being in perpetual beta is important. Jenny's work with empathy interviews and trusting parents to not lower the bar and teachers to be the experts on the science of learning is smart. Politics and mandated testing are getting in the way of real learning. Even the idea of design thinking. Many of us use this model for our classroom projects, but they have taken it to extend it to bringing about the world we want to live in is real world. That's design thinking on steroids. Just like Jenny and Donnell are giving their students time and guidance to form and reform their identities, it's time for us to honor their genius and give teachers and parents the same time to form and reform the identity of our schools. I know how challenging it is to make changes inside your own school or community. I've spent years working with schools around the world on creating learner-centered programs, and it always struck me how much schools were able to get done with the right tools and guidance. If you're ready to make changes like this in your own school, let's talk and put together an action plan. Visit educationevolution.org/consult for a free 15-minute call, and let's see if we're a good fit for more work together. Education Evolution listeners, you are the ones to ensure we create classrooms where each student is seen, heard, valued, and thriving. We need you. Let's go out and reach every student today. I'd be so grateful if you'd head over to your podcast app to give a great rating and review if you found this episode valuable. Don't wait. Please do it right now before you forget. I really appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Signing off, I am Maureen O'Shaughnessy, your partner in boldly reimagining education.